Nobody tells you this when you're staring at the future and your stomach feels tight, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's the only honest way to start. If your plan to survive AI is to find one perfect skill, one perfect degree, one perfect tool, you're already late. Not because you're not smart, not because you're not talented, but because you're asking the wrong question. The real question isn't, what should I study so AI doesn't replace me? The real question is, what should I become so AI can't turn me into a commodity? And I want you to hold on to that word, commodity, because it's the silent killer in the AI era. A commodity is something the market can replace without caring. If you're a commodity, your value collapses the moment a cheaper, faster version appears. AI is manufacturing cheaper and faster at a scale your nervous system can feel, even if your mind can't fully calculate it. That's why people feel the panic first and understand the logic later. So I'm not going to calm you down with vague optimism. I'm going to give you a blueprint that actually works in the world Jensen Huang lives in, the world of accelerated computing, relentless iteration, brutal feedback loops, and building platforms that compound. Because Huang's mindset is not protect your job. His mindset is build the future so fast that the future has to hire you. That's the difference between people who get dragged by change and people who ride it like a wave they engineered. Here's the shift you need to internalize right now. For decades, humans learned to speak the machine's language. You wanted results, you paid the entry fee, syntax, frameworks, debugging, deployment. That era created a barrier, and barriers create scarcity. Scarcity creates high wages, but the barrier is collapsing because the machine is learning to speak your language. So value is moving. When how becomes easy, value moves to what and why. When code becomes cheap, direction becomes expensive. When content becomes infinite, truth becomes rare. When execution becomes fast, judgment becomes the bottleneck. And this is exactly how Huang thinks about technology. He doesn't sell chips, he sells time. He sells the compression of years into weeks, the compression of experiments into iterations, the compression of guesswork into measurable progress. Accelerated computing is literally about pulling the future closer. So if you want to survive, you don't study the part of work that is becoming abundant, you study the part that is becoming scarce, and the scarce part is not effort, it's not even intelligence, it's clarity. The ability to define the right problem, specify constraints, evaluate results, and take responsibility when reality pushes back. AI can generate outputs. It cannot carry the consequences of being wrong. You can. That is not a motivational line. That is economic reality. The people who win will be the ones who can verify, decide, and own outcomes. So let's talk about what you actually need to study, starting today, in a way that makes you stronger every month instead of just updated. The first foundation is deep domain expertise in a field where reality fights back. Pick a domain with constraints and consequences. Medicine, biology, energy, manufacturing, logistics, finance, law, education, cybersecurity, robotics, agriculture, materials. Not because those are trendy words, but because those are places where almost correct is still wrong. AI is amazing at sounding confident. It is less amazing at being reliably correct without oversight, especially when stakes are high, data is messy, incentives are misaligned, and the world changes. If you become genuinely good in a domain, AI stops being your competitor and becomes your force multiplier. Because then you can do what most people can't. You can tell the difference between a plausible answer and a true answer, between a clever suggestion and a safe decision, between a shiny plan and an executable plan. That's why the best advice isn't learn to code or don't learn to code. The best advice is become the kind of person who can make correct decisions in a real system. When you can do that, the tool set doesn't matter as much because tools change. But truth still matters, consequences still matter, responsibility still matters. Now, the second foundation you study is quantitative thinking, because the AI era will drown you in outputs and opinions, and without quantitative thinking, you will be emotionally manipulated by whatever sounds best. You don't need to become a mathematician. You need to become someone who can estimate, compare, test, and smell nonsense. Study basic statistics and probability like your future depends on it because it does. Learn what a base rate is. Learn what overfitting looks like. Learn how selection bias creeps in. Learn the difference between correlation and causation in a way that changes how you trust claims. Learn how to design a simple evaluation. If an AI tool says it improves productivity, how would you measure that? With what baseline, over what time horizon, and with what failure conditions? Most people will not do this. Most people will accept what feels good and moves fast. That will work until the day it doesn't, and then it will break them. Quantitative thinking is not about being cold, it's about being free. Free from being fooled by confidence. In Huang's world, performance is not a vibe, it's measured. Latency, throughput, accuracy, energy efficiency, cost per inference, time to train. The winners don't argue in adjectives, they argue in metrics. So if you want to survive, you learn to think in metrics. You learn to ask, how do we know? And you learn to build a small test that answers it. The third foundation is systems thinking, and this one is so important that if you only take one thing seriously, take this. In the AI era, task doers become replaceable because tasks become modular and automatable. Systems thinkers become invaluable because they see how the parts interact. A system is not just a collection of steps. It's feedback loops, bottlenecks, incentives, failure modes, edge cases, and unintended consequences. Every organization is a system. Every product is a system. Every AI pipeline is a system. Your career is a system. If you can see systems, you stop being reactive. You become predictive. You start asking questions that sound almost unfair. Where is the bottleneck really? What is the constraint that sets the pace for the whole operation? If I speed up one part, what breaks next? What risk increases? What cost increases? What new dependency appears? What information do we lack that would make this decision obvious? Huang's success isn't just vision, it's systems thinking at scale. Hardware plus software plus developer ecosystem plus platform strategy plus relentless execution. That's the lesson for you. Don't study isolated skills the way people collect certificates. Study how skills connect inside a system. Then you become someone who can redesign the system, not just operate it. Now we get practical because you don't survive by admiring ideas. You survive by turning ideas into behavior. Starting today, you need to build what I'll call your personal AI lab. Not a cute hobby, a disciplined environment where you learn faster than fear. Here's the rule: choose one domain and one real problem, and build a loop that forces you to produce, test, and improve. If you're in business, your problem might be customer support triage, churn prediction, proposal writing with verification, competitor analysis with sources, internal knowledge-based search. If you're in healthcare, your problem might be summarizing patient notes safely, designing patient education materials that are readable and accurate, organizing research papers with strict inclusion criteria, building checklists that reduce mistakes. If you're in education, your problem might be generating practice questions with difficulty calibration, creating personalized study plans with measurable outcomes, building feedback rubrics that are consistent. The key is the same. You don't just generate outputs. You build a verification process. You create a data set of good versus bad. You measure improvement. You log failures. You iterate. This is how you stop being a user of AI and become an operator, someone who can reliably produce outcomes. In Huang's culture, iteration is everything. The goal is not to be perfect on day one. The goal is to learn faster than anyone else by turning reality into feedback. And you must study communication, not sounding smart, but being painfully clear. Because AI is not magic. AI is direction multiplied. If your direction is vague, you get vague output. If your direction is precise, you get useful output, so your ability to specify becomes power. Study how to write a crisp problem statement. Study how to define constraints. Study how to describe success and failure. Study how to ask for multiple approaches and compare them. Study how to demand citations and then verify them. Study how to tell a model what it must not assume. This is not just prompting. This is specification. This is the interface layer between human intent and machine execution. In the old world, the interface was code. In the new world, the interface is language plus structure plus evaluation. That's why people who can think clearly will dominate, because clear thinking is rare, and AI punishes unclear thinking by giving you 1,000 wrong answers quickly. If you can communicate clearly, you can run the machine like an instrument instead of being entertained by it like a toy. Now let's address the thing everyone avoids because it sounds uncomfortable. Your relationship with discomfort is part of what you need to study, because the AI era will not be emotionally gentle. It will be a constant stream of updates, new tools, new expectations, and shifting standards. If you require stability to function, you will suffer. If you can learn inside instability, you will thrive. Huang has a reputation for being intensely demanding, and behind that intensity is a simple belief: the world is hard, and pretending it's not hard makes you fragile. You don't need to become harsh, you need to become resilient, and resilience is trainable. Study how you react when you don't understand something. Study how you react when you fail publicly. Study how you react when a tool changes overnight. Do you freeze? Do you blame? Do you procrastinate, or do you go into problem-solving mode? The people who survive will not be the ones with the most talent. They will be the ones who can take a hit, learn, and move. Because AI rewards iteration, and iteration includes failure. If you treat failure as identity damage, you'll quit. If you treat failure as data, you'll improve. That's not philosophy, that's a competitive advantage. Now, yes, let's talk about what to study in AI itself, because you do need literacy, but you don't need to drown in advanced theory first. You need the 80-20 that makes you dangerous quickly. Start with how modern AI actually works at a conceptual level. What a model is, what training is, what inference is, why data quality matters, why context windows matter, why models hallucinate, why retrieval helps, why evaluation is hard. Study the basic architecture ideas enough to reason about limitations. Then learn the workflow layers: data collection, cleaning, labeling, retrieval, prompting, tool use, guardrails, monitoring, feedback loops. Learn the difference between a one-off chat and a system that improves over time. Learn what it means to version prompts, version datasets, and measure regressions. Learn the economics: why compute costs matter, why latency matters, why scaling changes what's possible, why GPUs and parallelism transformed AI. You don't have to become a hardware engineer, but you should understand why accelerated computing matters, because it explains why the AI wave is not slowing down. It's not hype running on vibes, it's a compounding curve running on infrastructure. Here's the study plan most people won't follow, and that's why it works. Every week, split your learning into 4 tracks and never skip a track. Track 1, Domain Mastery. Read, practice, and build real competence in a field with consequences. Track 2, Quantitative Thinking, Statistics, Probability, Evaluation, Measurement. Track 3, Systems and Product Thinking, how to design workflows, reduce bottlenecks, manage risk, improve processes. Track 4, AI Tooling Literacy, how to use models, how to build retrieval, how to test, how to monitor, how to iterate. Then, this is the most important part, every week you build something small that combines all 4 tracks. Not a giant project, a small thing that works, a small workflow that saves time, a small tool that reduces errors, a small analysis that produces a decision, a small experiment with a clear metric. That's how you compound. That's how you become unreplaceable. Not by being the best at one isolated skill, but by being the person who can connect skills into outcomes. Now, I want you to hear this next part carefully because it might be the most profitable thing you ever learn. The AI era will create a massive gap between people who can generate and people who can verify. Generation will be cheap, verification will be expensive, and verification is not just fact-checking, verification is understanding, verification is judgment, verification is knowing what correct means in your domain. So one of the smartest things you can study today is how to build verification frameworks. If you work with text, study how to demand sources, how to triangulate, how to detect contradictions, how to build checklists that catch the most common errors. If you work with code, study how to write tests, how to use static analysis, how to do threat modeling, how to validate outputs under edge cases. If you work with decisions, study how to define acceptance criteria, how to run small pilots, how to measure unintended consequences. Most people will never do this because it feels slower at first, but it makes you faster forever because it prevents catastrophic waste. It turns AI from a slot machine into a factory. Quantitative thinking is not about being cold, it's about being free. Free from being fooled by confidence. In Huang's world, performance is not a vibe. It's measured: latency, throughput, accuracy, energy efficiency, cost per inference, time to train. The winners don't argue in adjectives, they argue in metrics. So if you want to survive, you learn to think in metrics, you learn to ask, how do we know? And you learn to build a small test that answers it. And while we're here, you should also study ethics and incentives, not as a moral performance, but as operational survival. AI systems reflect data, incentives, and objectives. If objectives are wrong, outputs are wrong. If incentives are misaligned, systems become dangerous. In the real world, the biggest failures won't come from AI as evil. They'll come from we optimized the wrong metric. You need to study how harm happens in systems: bias, feedback loops, manipulation, surveillance, over-reliance, automation complacency. You need to study how trust is built: transparency, accountability, human oversight, explainability where it matters, and clear boundaries. If you become someone who can deploy AI responsibly in a real organization, you instantly separate yourself from the crowd that only knows how to generate flashy demos. Real organizations don't pay for demos, they pay for reliability. They pay for risk reduction. They pay for compliance. They pay for trust. If you can provide that, you become essential. Now let's kill the biggest myth so it doesn't poison your plan. You do not need to predict the future to survive it. You need to build a learning engine that adapts faster than the future changes. That's why what to study today is less about a static list and more about creating a personal system. Your system should include daily practice, weekly builds, monthly audits, and a growing portfolio of proof. And yes, portfolio, because credentials will matter less than demonstrated ability. You need artifacts, case studies, prototypes, write-ups, measurable results, before and after comparisons. If someone asked you, show me that you can use AI to create value without breaking things, could you show them? That's the standard that's coming. So study how to document your work, how to explain your decisions, how to show metrics, how to communicate trade-offs. This is why clarity matters so much. It becomes your evidence. At this point, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, but should I still learn to code? Here's the real answer. Frame the way Huang would frame it. Coding is becoming more accessible, which means the advantage is shifting from syntax to systems. Learning to code is still valuable, not because it keeps you safe from AI, but because it gives you the ability to shape tools, automate workflows, and test ideas quickly. But you don't have to become a traditional programmer to benefit. You can learn enough to be dangerous: scripting, APIs, basic web concepts, data manipulation, automation. The goal is not to worship code. The goal is to remove friction between your ideas and reality. If you can turn an idea into a working prototype in a weekend, you accelerate your life. If you can't, you depend on other people's timelines. So study enough technical fluency to build, test, and iterate. Then let AI amplify you. This is the new model. You plus AI becomes a small team. You plus AI becomes a studio. You plus AI becomes a lab. But only if you have direction and verification. Without those, you're just asking for noise. Now I'm going to give you a 30-day challenge that turns all of this into motion. For the next 30 days, you pick one domain problem and you run an experiment every single day. Not a huge one, a small one. Day 1, you write the clearest problem statement you've ever written. Day 2, you collect 10 examples of what good looks like and 10 examples of what bad looks like. Day 3, you build a prompt that generates outputs and a checklist that evaluates them. Day 4, you run 20 trials and score them. Day 5, you refine. Day 6, you add retrieval from a trusted source. Day 7, you test again. Then you repeat the cycle, improving one variable at a time. In 30 days, you won't just learn AI. You will become someone who can build a reliable AI workflow in your domain. That is rare, that is employable, that is survivable. And it's exactly the kind of disciplined iteration that mirrors how world-class engineering teams operate. Because here's what's coming, and you need to feel it. Soon, being able to generate text, images, code, or